They have a swimming pool on the roof of Shoreditch House, the private members' club, now occupying a couple of floors of what was once a tea warehouse. Part of the remit in terms of sophisticated entertainment is to promote events that touch on local history and heritage. I gave a talk in a bamboo bar where the gins kept coming on silver trays and the Shoreditchers were alert and responsive to alternative myths of place. One heavy presence, Titus, in a loose designer suit that gave off sparks as he moved, blocked a doorway, swilling pints of fruit-topped cocktail fuel and grousing. When the time came for questions, he grabbed the microphone and fisted it towards his broken cosmetic snub like a licorice toothpick. History, he said, was pig's bollocks dipped in sherbet.
The thing with the Overground is to try and colonise and remake a geography that is a spin-off and a satellite of the major developments that happen in the Stratford hub. That you've created that using the smokescreen of enormous amounts of public money and media attention that could be whipped up around the fraudulent Olympics over a short period of time. And then the Olympics have to be serviced, so the railways have to be changed in different ways. And you make this Overground circuit right around London, which creates a microclimate biased towards certain forms of regeneration and development.
See? Is this the book?
I've got the book somewhere.
And you wrote all this by yourself?
Yeah.
Do you want to hold the bag?
No, it's all right. I can do that with bits that I can remember. And it's just what we've just done now. We turned left out of Rotherhithe, and after I photographed Kötting and noted the understated symmetry of the station and the windows in satisfying proportions, I remember what it felt like to look across the water from the other shore, on the north shore, when I was still trying to write about the early narrow street developer who chained himself to the slimy wall and waited for the tide to swallow him. Rotherhithe was not a place to which he'd previously given much consideration. It looked foreign and somewhat estranged from itself. The significance of this apparently random assembly of buildings awed him. He became aware of patterns, meanings, distributions of unexplained energy. His sense of colour was overwhelmingly personal. It hurt his blood. Andrew Kötting could never get on with Downriver. At the time he was assembling his short Thames comedy Jaunt, friends told him he should try my book. He might be able to steal a few lines. He tried and he hated it. Kötting was a voracious reader. He carried books on trains and planes and boats. Sometimes he even opened them, a paragraph at a time, a sentence, a word, confabulation. That's why he loved Beckett, the white spaces. See? So it's all in there.
It's all in the book.
All in there.
I should try reading it.
Yes.
What's it like? Any good?
No. But the point is,
like
that this is the generator. This is it. You know,
okay.
This is why all that land we're going to walk across. Without this, it doesn't sing, does it?
It doesn't exist really until you've been here.
And our original connection was really water, in the sense that your voyage gallivant, although you're on the land, it's a kind of wonderful negotiation between land and sea, and you're always leaping off rocks into the sea in the suit, and opening up that fabulous connection between the generationary grandmother, who's a South Londoner.
She's
a
Kentian woman, really, a woman of Kent.
Woman of Kent.
She's a woman of Kent. Yeah.
And when you first married and you're living with Eden as a baby, that's
Peeps Estate. We'll walk past that in a while. And maybe we'll go to the Sigali via the Cafe Gallery, which is also another morphic resonator for me. It's an important.
Have you ever been in your swimming?
You want to go in now?
Well, yeah, go ahead. It's got you tasked with searching out mysterious buildings, eccentric clerks, minor circumlocution office hirelings barricaded behind dusty ledgers. I came down this road, there was a big fire. That building is still there, it wasn't me. Sue.
Is that what I said?
Yeah, that's you, sir. Norway dog, Greenland
No, I
dog.
didn't do that either.
No?
I didn't do that one either. That's two that I didn't do.
Yes, you did. We cross a bridge to enter the shopping zone. That's up there, isn't it?
Yeah.
Kötting is upbeat about the development. He's come here in former times to buy sports kit, budget trainers. The whole deal
that's
is
the Decathlon over
cheerfully
there.
budget. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
Slave labour, all child labour.
South London vernacular.
Yeah.
Easy insecurity.
Easy insecurity. Easy boy insecurity.
Why did you put your fingers in your ears at this point?
Noise,
Just the
wasn't it?
noise.
Was it the
The
noise?
noise of all the.
Yeah, it's the noise
Or
of
was
the
it
memory.
my
The
voice banging away in your
No,
head?
it's noise of memory. I mean, you didn't help. It was the noise of memory.
The noise of memory.
The noise of memory can become slightly overwhelming sometimes.
The original idea for the walk was accidental as always. I was just trying to get away really from all the developments in the lower Lee Valley, which was the memoryscape I'd been walking around and wandering in for years. And it suddenly felt like it had been enclosed and a narrative was being imposed on it. I wanted to look for something else. So I struck off in another direction and stumbled more or less on the Overground railway, which was known as the Ginger Line. And at this point it became clear that you could make a complete circuit of London, a kind of inner circuit of London, to run in parallel to the walk I'd done years before, the Millennium, around the M25 motorway, around the road system of London. I now wanted to do the rail system and to discover really if the railway itself provided a microclimate that was a kind of suburb of its own that separated it from the rest of London and attached it, property and railway and speculation, all into one big, lovely, jammy equation. And so I persuaded Andrew Kötting, who was up for these kind of madnesses, to come with me to do the whole walk in a single day. That was the idea, that we would go round a circuit of London instead of a year as it took me with the M25, in one day, one hit, starting in Haggerston, heading south to the river, crossing at Wapping, and then going right round the south side until we reached Battersea, when we crossed over on Battersea Bridge and up all the way to Willesden, circling back to the Massif at Hampstead and on back round down to Haggerston.
Soccer axed over gun violence. Mole man tunneler found.
Good, very good. Thank you. Right, okay. Right, we'll see you
Bye, Anna.
in another
Thanks for
day.
having us. Wish us luck. I don't like the dark. Yeah, he's making. I'm doing this under sufferance, okay? Anna, my agent doesn't want me to do this.
We'll go to Haggerston first. Well, I told you I pulled a muscle watching rugby.
Was that just to jump in,
Yeah,
standing out of your
I'm
chair?
so tense.
All excited.
I may not be my usual self.
Well, if you need a lie down anywhere, we've got to get a cab back. I promise I won't tell anyone.
I've got a knife for your blisters,
Yeah, but look, I bought
a bit
blisters.
of butter.
Then I put blisters on blisters.
That's a good hat. That looks like a Peruvian mountain hat.
Oh, shut up about bloody
But
Peru.
is it South American hat?
No, it's
a Layla.
It's a Faroese bonnet. Yeah.
Yeah, because these stations are like beacons of light, aren't they?
Yeah.
They look like swimming pools. Everybody else is coming home for
Yeah.
their cocktails in the new flats.
And
You
we're
can
off
see
to
that
work.
they've all got books and pictures, flat screens of bikes. That looks quite suitably crazy.
rebirth as hip boom town, the arrival of the Overground, taking up tracks, unused and allowed to rot in the Thatcher period, signalled the political emasculation of Hackney and its rebirth as hip boom town. House prices of terraces condemned in the era of tower blocks doubled and then trebled overnight. Locals, mesmerised by daily offers, couldn't decide whether to stick or bust. The faster we travel, the less we will arrive. Dalston physics, a special theory of relativity. Wide pavements are very well once you've negotiated the permanent holes, the cones, the barriers, the regiments of recycling bills at which passing motorists hurl their cartons. Empire of insanity, like the credits for that television toga buster Rome when the graffiti comes to life, a preamble to orgies of blood, rapine and trashed history. The fallen rise from their graves, and yet again it's our darling city. Yet again it's our darling city. It's changed. I think the kind of psychoclimate has changed slightly from that moment, because it's now much more hipster beard, cafe, you know. Because the thing that you imagine, that different drugs, or kind of better drugs, and you've got these big Barrett piazzas and fountains and all that stuff, which wasn't there at the time. This was before that. This was kind of, it was on the edge of it. Now it's present. It's more robotic.
Yes.
And the railway.
They've rebranded.
The railway wasn't there. We're in Willesden Junction station, which is pretty important to the story. My story of Hackney, living here from '68 and using this old railway as a way to get down to the city. It was, built from here for the bank clerks, who were one of the first major groups that came into this area, which was then a kind of suburb, and this was a commute for them, and it was closed up in that Thatcher period on the understanding there was no further use for it, only because they really wanted to do the development, the shadow development down in the city, put up a pastiche New York, ice rink, Richard Serra, Broadgate development, the usual kind of inflated art objects, all that stuff, all came, and this railway then became a beautiful natural ghost highway for many years. But the person who's been most associated in my mind with the developments here and the community challenges to it, Bill Parry-Davies, who's a local solicitor and also a very important mover and shaker in open Dalston, and a jazz man and various other things. But you followed the whole story, the whole tragic story here, really, of this station, which came in under a series of excuses that weren't justified, and resulted in the destruction of very significant buildings.
The station had been planned by the railway planners for years because it was the final link to create the overground ring, the orbital ring of the Overground Railway, a bit like the M25, but in rail. So we were looking forward to the railway, but it became a sort of Trojan horse, because what it brought with it was something that they called regeneration, which wasn't, I mean, it was a time when Dalston wasn't rising from the ashes. Actually, they were almost burning it, a lot of it down, all these fires on development sites, and then the railway came in, and they said it's going to make you more prosperous, it's going to regenerate the area. And I had imagined these railway carriages full of money coming in, and we were all going to benefit from it. But it didn't quite work out like that. And what it resulted was whole swathes of demolition of our local heritage. The old the 1886 circus, where people came in their thousands in the turn of the 19th century because Dalston was a destination, and they were going to remove all of those things which made it a destination. You know what happened, Ian, when they got the go-ahead for this and Barratt got on site, there was the crash, the credit crash, 2008-9, and we were worried that all the building was going to stop. We were going to be left with concrete stumps here. And what happened was Barratt started advertising in Southeast Asia. They eventually opened an office in Beijing, and the first block of flats to be sold here, off plan, was to a Chinese buyer, 12 flats to a Chinese buyer. And in a way it became a template for the development of the rest of London.
Absolutely.
No affordable housing, no affordable housing of these 300 flats, no affordable housing, but a lot of them were bought by investors. And what you've seen since then, all over London, is the same thing happening.
Yeah, Stratford in particular, and I think that's why this figure is here. I think he's a kind of a new version of a young Maoist. A capital raider, unpicking capitalism from the inside by gradually buying it all up and then letting it fall down. It's maybe a good scheme. But how do people in this area, which was a pretty modest area for a long time, how do they get a foot into it at all? I mean, how do families sort of... They don't. I mean, the people you've been dealing with over the years, so must have...
People live in the most appalling conditions. You know, 3 kids in a bedroom. I still see it, you know, roofs leaking, walls mouldy, asthmatic kids. They can't put... The average income in Hackney, household income, is about £30,000. To buy an affordable flat on TfL's latest development on the Western Curve with Balfour Beatty, you need an average income of something like £75,000–£80,000. So it's way, way beyond the reach. Even the affordable flats are unaffordable. So what they hoped, what they said was, we're going to attract a critical mass of better off people to Dalston, and that's going to regenerate it. That's what they said. So all this stuff isn't for local people.
To Hoxton, our second station, is a confusion of recycled container stacks, new build flats, converted warehouses with spectral trade signs for veneering. Rail zone is still settling into its identity as a generator for investment, a Viagra overload for property prices. The high railway under its pergola of wires, the compulsory blue bicycle rack, the rescued cobbles, the heady waft of proper coffee. When you think I used to get my living out of these streets. Every Sunday morning about 5 o'clock, combing all the stalls for books, and it used to be possible to find enough to get you through the next week. I think the railway walk points this up more than anything else. Do you get that sense that you move even between one station and the next, and the whole atmosphere, the whole ambience of where you are in London changes? You can just feel it physically as you walk. Just coming across from Shoreditch to here on Cheshire Street is a different country. And more than anything else in London, this bridge here, going over the railway, is like going between East Berlin and West Berlin. You're a real nodal culture point in London. That just to the right is the Carpenter's Arms, which was this pub owned by the Cray twins. It was apparently their last business that they owned in this area, and where they went off on the night of the murder of Jack the Hat. That's where it happened. And the writer Emanuel Litvinov, who wrote Journey Through a Small Planet, grew up very close to here, along with his half-brother David Litvinov, who became the inspiration behind the film Performance. A real interesting London hustler, connected to Francis Bacon, Lucian Freud, the Crays, gambling, Mick Jagger, the whole world. He was the sort of secret history of that 60s period, and he grew up here. Alexander Barron, who wrote The Lowlife, wrote a book called King Dido that was set about a family that was right here on what they call Hare Marsh. So that history is not eradicated, and crossing the railway is like crossing into the old life. Yes, this was totally the landscape of Downriver. Inspiration for it all. Beautiful shards. The scavengers are out there. At the time of Downriver, when you came down here, the dominant thing was Tower Bridge. Now, of course, it's utterly dwarfed by the glass buttock of City Hall and the prong of the Shard, the pastiched sail. It's a different city to Downriver. Downriver was the height of the Thatcherite period, when all of the stuff that's happening now was there, like a whisper from the future, and the book tried to pick up on that. But now we're living in what that anticipated, and it's accurate in some ways, and in other ways it's not, because the surface has got sort of smoother and apparently slicker and easier, but the pain is even more extreme than anything I'd anticipated. I was being satirical about the idea of return to the prison hulks and the barges and the privatized prisons, but this actually has become fact. You know, there are all of the things that was once have been the responsibility of politics have been sold off, and politicians do nothing except act as PR for global banking interests, and the attempt is to make London just a colony in that enterprise. This is such a marker. Champagne bottles. What you now find alongside these flats, 2 empty champagne boxes. And so once upon a time you were finding fragments of old clay pipes of the workmen who worked down here in the dockers. Now it's literally the champagne. I mean, this is what I'm saying, you know, these two worlds are splitting apart so fast. I've always thought this, for me, this is a borderline place, because I don't really know what happens beyond, because the old North London line used to swing away down to Richmond and Kew. And this is John Berger has a great thing about getting out of the train here.
Really?
Because he used to, I think he did teaching somewhere like Richmond.
Right.
He came through here, and he sort of saw this as a landscape of the soul, and got out and started to produce a series of drawings, charcoal drawings. Along this stretch of the railway, it seems to be a cemetery line because it goes right through to Kensal Rise.
Is this the one that goes through to Kilburn?
Yeah, yes, it goes through to Kilburn. Kilburn is down this way now. If we just walk down here.
Yeah.
Rather unlikely buildings, yeah, opposite. So you can't redevelop this particular piece of ground, or at least not till they change the regulations. I had no idea this cemetery was here because we walked down that side of the railway when we came down.
You've got past that sticky hump of 69, which finished off.
It's a strange name. You might need to borrow for a novel sometime.
Very good.
Macaluso.
Now you've got past that sticky hump of 69, which saw off Alan Rickman and David Bowie.
Yes, I've got past that.
And extraordinary thing that Mike Moorcock outlived Bowie.
That is quite odd because, well, I think he was basically pretty sturdy, and then it was only going to Texas that made him fade away. This is quite how I see the people on the trains here. They've got this soft focus integrity.
Yeah.
And the fact that they're in Wedding. Oh, great.
Good name.
These portraits of people here with the softness is exactly the portraits of the ghosts in the train. This is it. This is the Overground walk had achieved its critical state. Kilburn High Road was a manifest border. Kossoff's Painted Ghosts, his Hamlet play of dead fathers in the booking hall, brushed past us with spidery touch. I thought of Chris Petit's novel Hard Shoulder, in which an Irishman returns from the little death of prison to the old life that's no longer there, among Kilburn rooming houses and Irish Republican pubs. Like so many Petit characters, O'Grady is emotionally atrophied. The book's narrative is a posthumous dream. The released prisoner is one of the revenants on parade, a face frozen in a train window, glimpsed and smeared by Leon Kossoff in rapid sketches undertaken in his Willesden Green garden while he waits beside the propped-up cherry tree. And then we got a quote from Chris Petit. After West Hampstead, Petit wrote, "The train travelled a ridge, slate sky, bled the colour from the view. O'Grady felt his stomach contract and thought of riding on, but he got out at Kilburn, pausing to watch the train move away down the long straight track. He couldn't remember if the carriages had always been silver."
Yeah.
Kilburn High Road had been a ditch when he left.
It
Still was, from what he could see. O'Grady looked for a pub in which to orientate himself while he waits for the sun to go down. Now he had grown invisible, which was how he wanted it.
The Black Lion, which was the kind of wedding cake pub in the book, that, which if you drank, when I drank there, they were kind of most concerned because you didn't fit in, and they thought I worked for the Kilburn Tricycle Theatre,
right.
and I said absolutely no way.
Yeah.
And then at that point I was kind of forgiven and allowed in. But that's now the last time I looked, it's Polish Gastro pub.
As well, they didn't connect you with your man from Ampleforth, who used to go there to pretend to pick up the Irish.
Yeah, but he turned up in a regimental blazer, going, sort of Abba Jesus, And then the other one was, which no one would drink in, was Billy Mulligan's. And if you went in there, you were just told to fuck off straight away. But I think Billy Mulligan, I think it's gone now.
Walkers are spies for truth, drawing imaginary lines from Deptford and from our starting point in Hackney to this railside halt. We're the sharp points of an isosceles triangle, and therefore, in some mystical, mathematical way, at the limit of one chapter of our journey. We are equidistant from our respective homes. Go any further and we will enter the unknown, trusting ourselves to orbital tracks, symbols of the diurnal cycle, darkness into light.
Nil.
No.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
20
good.
minutes.
That's a
There you go.
lovely screen.
20 minutes. And Man
It's
City was-
amazing when you consider we could hear the live noise of this.
Yeah, we could be
thing.
watching. Well, if that was back up the road a bit, it'd be perfect, wouldn't it? Just watch it in a stranger's house while I was listening to the real soundtrack.
The possession. Where's the hole in your leg?
It's on the left one. And in fact, this is. I was thinking it's not the longest walk that I would have done because I had a 2-day walk in the
walk
Pyrenees.
longer than this in a day.
In the Pyrenees, yeah.
Oh,
No, I sleep in the
oh,
woods,
oh,
and
sleep.
then I carried on the next day. I walked. I was about 25, 26 miles.
This is more than that.
Is it?
Yeah, 30.
Yeah, but if we get it right this time, we should do 20, 25.
It's yeah, certainly 25.
Yeah.
I would say
Yeah.
pushing towards 30.
I think it's Arsenal singing.
Yeah, you can say that. But
Yeah.
So, but the gallery owner would
Arsenal
get
winning? Have they just scored, Arsenal?
Sorry?
Have Arsenal just scored? The football team, Arsenal.
Yeah,
Have they just scored?
I have no idea.
There you go, a bit of buffoonery. That's what you were missing,
That's-
wasn't it?
that was the
Yeah, that's,
missing,
you were missing that. Yeah, it's not hard.
This is we slightly detoured to take in Rambo's house. When our previous walk,
Yeah.
I think you were asleep.
That was when I was asleep.
You don't hit register.
We've done with the
That's
time.
it.
Camden Road.
Yeah, this is it. I know. Stick through it.
This is Ian, this is Camden Road.
I noticed. No, up a bit because I can't get Camden Road.
I can't have the sunglasses this time.
That's lovely. Isn't it?
To be showing off.
Yeah, you did, didn't you? And you had a monkey.
A monkey?
Yeah, you had a monkey.
A monkey?
A monkey, a kind of stuffed monkey. Maybe you found it along the way. Yeah. We had all kinds of stuff.
It was in a scarf.
No, it's a monkey. Or a dog, or a lamb.
Well, you didn't mention it in the book though, did you?
I did.
Did you?
You read the book, yeah.
I've read the book. It's the only book I've read twice.
Kentish Town West to Camden Road was suspension of disbelief, a necessary sliding away and letting go. There were too many railways, too many carpet shops, too many Hackney migrants from the communal era of the 1960s had settled on these welcoming slopes.
Because I find my life's working backwards.
Okay.
When I started out, I had a job part-time teaching. So I've come full circle back to that.
Yeah. It'll be the white lines down the middle.
So next time we're off to the football pitches with the white lines. Then I'll start doing a bit of book dealing.
Well, you've done that already with Jeff Johnson.
Then I might try and read a book, write a
You're
book.
dealing your own book.
Yes. Yeah, it's been good.
It's the one.
No, it's the Abbey Tavern. The Abbey Tavern.
Oh, he was in that one, wasn't he?
It's in there.
Yeah, we sat round.
We sat there and we were there for about 2 hours.
Yeah.
There's lots of cafes.
Every time we get lost.
We never,
Days to find this one.
we never got lost. Never got lost.
Kilburn Town West.
The fields beneath, I like that. I'm just following my nose. If I didn't come through these flats before. My own sense of having done this journey around the Overground is that it is a kind of last London. We've lost one kind of organic city that had existed for hundreds or thousands of years, and it's really become something quite new and strange, and in some ways interesting now, but different. And you can see all the negative aspects of that very easily, but I kind of wondered if you'd picked up clues or hints of something that was, because London does have this wonderful ability to recharge itself, reinvent itself, become something different. Now it's clearly a kind of a world city rather than a British city, and also very largely electronic, digital, fast synapse. All of those things are happening, and you have this kind of instant architecture, narco architecture, vanity architecture, totally fly-by-night stuff that has no sense of being grounded in the way that the older buildings did. So what's happening that's vitalising and good? Shard is really there, like the dagger, isn't it? Feels to me like gradually the city is becoming very fragmented. It's a series of blocks that are hard to connect up, you know, in the way that once upon a time, when I was working down here as a gardener in the 70s, then things like the Hawksmoor churches were real markers in the territory. Now they're being dwarfed, I mean totally dwarfed by other structures that have grown up all around them, and that sense of a pattern isn't here really anymore in the same way. This is kind of about the Electric Avenue in Brixton and all that stuff, because it's the one bit of the Overground where there's no stop. It's like politically they don't allow a stop in Brixton, so you go you go from Denmark Hill, you go all the way to Wandsworth before there's a stop. So you have this huge lacuna in the middle, which is Brixton as Hackney used to be.
So you can't get in and you can't get out.
No, not on the Ginger Line. So you've got huge property developments around Peckham Rye, I mean, absolutely related to the Ginger Line. And that was my first London as well, because I went to
that's right.
film school down there in Electric Avenue. Okay. We plunged, we dropped. The Overground got away from us. It was a long haul to Clapham High Street. Picking up the airs and graces of superior suburbia and high ground halts like the hill stations of the British Raj around Simla, the railway declined to take on custom in low-class Brixton. A whole diaspora of Brixton, the whole thing was station. The place was like a seething platform of hucksters, fast food peddlers, jerk chicken joints, under bridges and pillars with sparking, electrified cables and mad, screaming music. Picking up our feet now in anticipation of a late lunch, we arrived in Electric Avenue, Brixton. It was my original London, and it wasn't quite a Proustian seizure. I should have been stepping down from the train and not dragging it behind me like an anchor tangled in gravestones. I remember back in 1962 how the act of arriving here in wide-eyed innocence carried the imprint of a platform as exotic to me as New York City's 3rd Avenue L.
Could you help pull me trousers up?
Rotherhithe is a tumour.
It's a tumour.
A tumour, a non-malignant nodule, a hump cut off by the red strip of the railway, infiltrated by docks, given over to retail parks and leisure boats.
Can you help pull my trousers
No,
up?
I can't.
Oh, please.
No. You don't need it. You don't need it.
Yeah, because if we do have to wait, he's going to get bloody livid. Yeah, one take or nothing.
Big leather Stetson hat, shorts, very short shorts.
No.
And he's like ponytail. And he's outside there every morning. Why? What's he doing? I don't know. Have a good one. Have a good one.
Have you ever given him a fag or anything?
No, I haven't got one.
No? Cigarette?
I could buy one, especially. Instead of all this.
Tommy Steele, I remember. When I first moved to Birmingham.
Yes, Tommy.
Everybody said, "Oh, Tommy Steele, he's a diamond, he is."
There was a building burnt down here, wasn't there? We saw. Oh, no, I read the plaque. Was that Peak Friends, or was it?
Yeah, the Peak Friends biscuit factory was actually back there. It's very close to the other side of the park.
I remember something about that.
Where they used to have lots of the free shows, you know, the early Goldsmith students. There's the Cathi Sports Special. I said home for me was just down here, just beyond the McDonald's on the left-hand side, about 100 yards, is Rainsborough Avenue. It's a block of flats. We'll see them in a minute when we go over the bridge. And that's where I had 20 years on the Pepys estate. That's in the diarist. I mean, you have to beat the bounds. That's what you do. You beat the bounds, but the bounds are ever changing, and the bounds are morphing in and out of each other. But you go back out there every day to try and find them again, and it's like you're scenting your territory. You're scenting the territory with words, with ideas that always belong. They always belong.
There's
but you don't know where they belong quite often until 2 years later.
If you're on one of these circular things, there's no way out till you can hit this other thing. I'm just wondering at what point you dissolve into the street. It's Nick Papadimitriou effect of effecting a genetic exchange with London. I think if you keep walking long enough, you literally dissolve into the pavement, take on the molecules. Clapham Junction is the real terminal point. Can't help thinking of Oscar Wilde being stuck on the station platform here when they were taking him off to Reading to jail, and the crowd jeering him. You know, he just had his trial and he was in something of a state of shock, and he's made to stand on the station in Clapham waiting for his connection. I was quite taken with the decayed pastoral of this mural on the end of this house here. As if some sort of ancient forest was breaking through the end wall. Traces of the English paradise garden of Lavender Hill, as it might once have been, with a blue space at the top ready for the railway to come through, a sort of viaduct above the water. And Adam and Eve, or William and Catherine Blake naked in their garden. Here they are. Here's the river coming along, and the whole mass of London. Looks like the shop where Andrew found a copy of one of my books, and again I'd signed it and stuck it away somewhere. The book Andrew Kötting bought to reward the dealer for his tolerance and biscuits was a paperback by Bruce Chatwin, What Am I Doing Here? A collection of essays and travel bits. I flicked through it. Man's real home is not a house, but the road, and how life itself is a journey to be walked on foot. I thought the capitalization of road was a little pretentious. But as I say, with the whole idea of the last London, it's this idea but you're able to write about an area for just so long, and I feel I've matrimony place. That's one of the unexpected sights of London, I think. These just quite Parisian, the steps up and the green, beautiful. What's this? Demolition of existing buildings. You know, I find one place I don't know that has an atmosphere leading to a garden, and you see immediately the demolition notice is already in place. So this kind of sneaking around London to find these luminous locales gets more and more and more difficult all the time. I really like the quality of that house there with the peeling paint. I remember it from the first walk. There's a spectacular mansion at the bottom of Braeburn Avenue, right beside Wandsworth Road Station. Paint is peeling. It might have been close to ginger once, laid over many coats of rusty brown. Odd windows, single chimney stack, Dutch roof, tiled. It's not a ruin, but it hankers after that status. A lurch into the Gothic. Really auditioning to be part of something.
The Overground, after crossing the Thames, all change please at Clapham Junction, has a revived identity. High on its embankment or down below, now screened by strategic planting, viewed over the lip of an established bridge, a rounded ledge of lichen blots, cracked and filled with mosses. The line has been coerced into its orbital promotion and splashed with ginger, but it retains its older inclination as a track for transporting coal, a link with the railway harbour at Willesden Junction, a boundary marker for Kensington and Chelsea, and a western run for Brompton Cemetery. The lodged dead absorb and soak up the restless movement of the city. They manufacture calm, contemplation, and a measure of gratitude that we are still on our feet, we are going home, this time. Andrew Kötting is inspired by this set. He sees possibilities for future interventions, for some sort of return as the ghost of a bear. The Lime Avenue's shortcut between Fulham Road and Lily Road is an oasis for wildlife and certain specialised subspecies of the human tribe, amateur antiquarians, canine accompanists, relatives paying their respects to the dear departed, gay men patrolling the outer circle, and wild-haired, barefoot vagrants setting down their burdens in shady alcoves. What attracted me was a sense of being somewhere with a rich history about which I knew very little.
When you wear this, you can't move through time and space quickly. You know, you have to meander, and you have to meander precariously. And I think in a way that kind of meandering is another metaphor for, you know, my creative process and perhaps even Iain's creative output. It kind of meanders, it ebbs and flows, and it never really goes in one direction. And so wearing this is, there you go, it's a metaphor for the Sinclairian verbiage.
I get really irritated if I'm driving. Oh God! This guy is one of the. I've got to somehow get a discreet photo. This man sitting behind us spends the entire day, every day, in Haggerston Park, on a bench at the back of Haggerston Park, looking south, and he's like a wonderful vegetative presence. And if you go into the park and he's not there, you think something's wrong. And I've never ever seen him outside the park.
Right.
So Gareth and I were trying. Where is he? Where is he? And he said, "Oh, Gareth, I think he's in a hostel on Kingston Road." Now we actually, so maybe this is a bench that he moves into when the park shuts. The park shuts when it gets dark. Yeah. But the entire day, from 8 o'clock in the morning, 6 o'clock at night, he's just on the bench with all these.
Surrounded by his bags.
I thought that's a really kind of powerful London meditation.
Yeah.
This guy anchors that view in an amazing way. Well, I'm quite intrigued by it. He's one of the great London presences. Within the Jewish philosophy, what is it? How many? There are, well, there's a certain number, seven.
There were definitely 10
7 or
commandments,
11 righteous men in the somewhere in the world at any given time. Secret figures who dispense charity or hold the wisdom of the doctrine, you know, whatever. And when one of them dies, another one mysteriously takes his place.
Right.
And by the same process, I think there are these 7 presences keeping a city like London organic and alive at any given time. This is one of them, this man.
Right.
He's like a kind of Buddha. Honestly, you feel the waves coming off when he's contemplating this park. As soon as you cross Whitechapel Road, the hipster graffiti vanishes. The streets are no longer a curation. And the train vanishes with it. That's a Patrick Keeler shot. This sign. Just to feel here that the openness, kind of slightly moving towards the river, but nobody is imposing anything on this in terms of the people are not working on the walls. Nobody is building these sealed off island enclaves. It's a kind of a really fertile emptiness that runs you down. And the railway's disappeared, which is, again, perfect. We come a bit off-piste away from the Overground Railway, which is what I like. Getting creatively lost is really important. And this is St Dunstan's in the east, in Stepney. And it's nostalgic because this was where I first really started to write about London, because I was a gardener in 1974, just across the road there in St George's Fields. And we used to cut the grass here. The truth of St Dunstan's is that Dunstan came here from Glastonbury, where he'd been abbot. And there's a connection with alchemy. Dunstan's associated with alchemy. And for me, it's the alchemy of the city. And the fact that anyone born at sea is officially attached to this church. So it's a kind of a very nice relation with the river. And with the memory of the older London, when this would have been fairly remote, and people like Erasmus and Thomas More all visited, as if to a very quiet and calm country place. And it's still got that, and it's nice to drift away from a moment from the frenzy of the railway and its new build developments and its Boris bikes, and to come back to somewhere that has got no particular grab on you anymore. It just is itself, and it's the perfect site for a kind of late autumn afternoon. And the other thing is that the Hawksmoor churches like St Anne's Limehouse and St George in the East and Christchurch have been overlaid with so much Gothic imagery now, and the ideas of ley lines and secret burials and all the stuff Peter Ackroyd and Alan Moore have made immensely popular, that you can't really step into them anymore. They're zones that resist you. They've had enough intervention, whereas St Dunstan's has kept itself out of the story. It is what it is. And it's, in that way, it becomes something more than a story that's been hijacked as an excuse for development. I'm really interested in the way that artists sort of secretly find the right corners of the city to hide away in and create and cook and alchemize the substance of the city into a series of works. And it was really brilliant that in the 1970s, which was a really submerged period in Dalston, Leon Kossoff moved his studio up onto Dalston Lane, and he was at the top of a building right on the railway here by the bridge, which gave access looking east towards the German hospital and obviously down in the future towards Stratford and Westfield and the Olympic site.
Kossoff spoke of the germination of his railway obsession. He remembered a young boy in wartime, labelled for transit, boarding at Liverpool Street. He was evacuated with other pupils from Hackney Downs School to King's Lynn in Norfolk. Leon would live with a Mr. and Mrs. Bishop, who gave him encouragement to paint. He remembered the view from the train window, the sheds, canals, allotments, gas holders. A landscape witnessed in transit is not the same as a walked landscape. Railways give you space and light and movement, he said. Kossoff's friend Andrea Rose, curator of the London Landscape Show, spoke of his intense gaze of love.
And looking west, he had on the right-hand side, he had Ridley Road Market, which he saw as this seething viral democracy in the same way that he painted the swimming pools, absolutely buzzing with life when he took his son to go swimming when he was not very well and he needed to help recover his strength. Leon started to do that in his own part of West London, in Willesden. I think this might be where Kossoff had himself a flat or a painting space, because you can see the trade sign for Claude Bastable, the builder, and he definitely had something that belonged to a builder. And when you're on the top floor there, you can see right over into the railway, which represents some of the views. And this way up here goes into Ken Livingstone territory. That's where he was MP for.
You used to see him on the tube,
and it's quite often. It's got quite a Hackney-ish feel to it once you go up there. I think he used to get down here with his son and wander about on the rail side. And this beast. This is Willesden Junction.
yeah, that's about right. Very good.
Very nice, actually. Very nice. All here. And you got the hoists in the background.
Yeah. Nice.
And that's
great.
That's it. That's here. I think we're from further up on the bridge. You probably. But when Kossoff had his studio right here by the builder's merchant, he and his young son used to describe scavenging this frontier landscape by the side of the railway and making a series of sketches, from which he then went back up there and made huge paintings. But the whole scenario for me confirms the idea of this play as a ghost railway, and it's the sort of the end of the line from having started drawing in Dalston above the railway at the bottom of Dalston Lane in the mid-1970s, just when the German hospital was being converted from an old asylum into private flats, and Ridley Road was being threatened. He gets all that. Then he moves up round York Way, and finally this is it. This is their ultimate landscape of storage and dispersal.
That gaze informs our orbital walk. It achieves everything we're stumbling to document. Kossoff's railway paintings are both document and vision. The migration from Dalston to Willesden Green shares with Ballard that sense of contemporary recorder's prophecy, how a private person, working under laboratory conditions in the London suburbs, strips the veins of the city.
Another nodal point. This is the very point where Boris Johnson acknowledged the presence of the fictional Norton and decided that the Ginger Line was the secret of London. And he came down here to pose for a photograph. That must be St John's, yeah. And this is where there were these monkeys were running about in the trees. The marmosets have gone. A graveyard detached from its host, a church tower faking a period grandeur, with its body tumbles wantonly into decay behind the corrugated iron fencing. From the low steps of St John's, Scandrett Street, I mourn the loss of another secret locale, a temenos remaining sacred because we do not need to visit it. It's there, and that's enough. The balance in our psychic map of the city is unharmed. The whole thing of doing those journeys is simply to kind of locate this psychic map that I'm speaking about there, that the city is a series of these psychic mappings that reinforce our own identity. And then once you've written about them, even casually, you have to come back to them. So you keep repeatedly returning to the ground that's no longer the ground necessarily just of London, but it's the ground of your own version of London. That's the reason I love London, and I've written about it all these years, is that you can never even begin, you know, to think that you've got the story, you've nailed it. You can't begin. Every single moment there's an addition going backwards to tell you that, and something happening in the present world that annoys you or sparks you or inspires you. You can't go down, can you? No, it's all locked up. I love these steps, but we can't take them. The way the vegetation is all squashed and beaten there looks worth getting. The P.D. James and the Agatha Christie. See it? It's just staggering kind of places that they have. Go down onto the canal.
Which way?
Oh, this way. We'll
Yeah.
just link on back and then push on towards Kilburn. I just want to go around this estate to see what's happening. Because you wouldn't have had much dealing with the canal system when you were out in this part of.
No.
It was all car and.
It was pretty much. It was pretty much the Jaguar XJ6 years.
Yeah, there wasn't a lot of exploring of territory.
Yeah, quite a bit.
I mean, but in a car.
In a car, it was in a car, yeah. The big change when I was in
Big shed.
Kilburn, which confirmed the whole kind of driving around up there, was the development of Brent Park, which was the first big Tesco superstore on the North Circular. and also the first IKEA.
These strange brick cathedrals of vagrancy are much more in the mood of asylum.
Yeah.
Which you'd see them as sort of incubation cubicles for strange dreams. But this has evolved a huge amount since I came down here when I was doing the book. Because then it was just a flat, kind of slightly overgrown, very, very like the Lee. Now it looks like they're excavating serious sort of Olympic qualities of earth. Have a whole panoramic view. With a slight curve to it. This is the future. So I guess the thing is now, Willesden twins completely with Stratford, and you've got the huge mega mall in Shepherd's Bush, Westfield, and its partner in Stratford.
Yeah.
The helicopters are beginning to come backwards and forwards over the top here. Even the ordinary sheds look like just gigantic containers. And on this side, Boris's area of opportunity. And that noise is sort of perpetual, that is it reversing or whatever it is. I think this is probably the point where inertia goes back into paranoia. And they have the power source of this is the experiencing the power of the efficacy of prayer. So essentially this is the first sort of taxi cab thing that's run on prayer as the basic commodity. Perfect. This is the ghost zone of London, it definitely is. We're saying how Tate Hughes began to see ghosts on the train towards the end, particularly the Northern Line. And Chalk Farm, you would see Sylvia Plath was sitting in the carriage. And again, I'm kind of quite interested in going back over the crisscrossing cultural paths and references to see where they connect up.
A great line was written by Shane McGowan, some of us fell into heaven, some of us fell into hell, about our generation and punk era sort of people really, rather than hippie era people. I think it was a time in London, and again, like, London's dark. London has a dark heart, as well as has, these extraordinary times of frolicking. And some people who kind of get with the harsh of London can often have some time, not exactly frolicking, but making things happen, and it's not actually easy. It's not what I would call a good time that's gone missing.
Can you feel the water?
You divined it.
It is a sacred part of London, obviously. The Gospel Oak and the Parliament Hill tumulus. It's one of the three markers, with the Penton Mound and Tot Hill. Look at that, it's sort of, it is a face. I thought that was a series of sacred geography.
Crazy.
I thought, whoa! I thought
these
these were the ley lines of London. Okay.
Do I look anything like baby Jesus?
That's good. It's actually better as a photograph.
What, than in real life?
Yeah, than in real life.
You going to take the door with me?
Wonderful. It looks complete serial killer.
Perfect. And the moon, look, yeah? If you stand here, in the minute when the train goes, you see the moon. It gets dangerous, doesn't it? That star looks a bit close to the moon. Yeah. Is it my imagination, or is it headed towards the moon? It is getting closer.
It's definitely getting closer.
Maybe it is a plane then.
It's flying.
Yeah, keep your eye on it, let's see.
How did you get the moon so big in that shot you took? After we cross Finchley, Frognall, West Hampstead, I think it'll get very quiet. It's Tandoori.
And then the next one we kind of cut off.
Yeah, we go over the hill, right over the hill. Oh, burger? Well, just depends how
Quick,
a burger. Be quick.
Yeah, because
Fried chicken, yeah.
burger. Anything you want.
Okay.
The Shepherd's Bush Westfield is kinder, but Andrew decides he isn't hungry anymore. And he'd rather piss in the woods at the edge of Wormwood Scrubs. We pass through the super mall, the former rail depot, and on to Wood Lane. I'm astonished by the suspension of corporate sensitivity post-Savile, responsible for a large high-definition poster on the side of BBC Studios, where a crowd of unticketed folk are waiting to be let in as noisemakers for a game show. There's quite an evil landscape here with Westfield brooding over our shoulder, I think, and beyond that would have been the BBC, but you can't see that anymore because it's been turned into luxury flats. And down there's the train line, which they put in especially for this Westfield development, because you don't often get a new tube station popping up virtually overnight, do you? But this one certainly seemed to, anyway. Well, this is a kind of crossroads. Well, not just because we've got this, we're standing literally at a crossroads. Over in this direction is Shepherd's Bush, noted, well, reputed to have been a plague pit. Shepherd's Bush Green always having a reputation for dodginess, and but also a good pop cultural centre as well. I think we had 3/4 of the Sex Pistols came from Shepherd's Bush. Where else in the world did we get this? Elvis? Salt and pepper, or is it red and wine?
Bombs were coming down. Is life long enough to complete this film?
But yeah, 20 years ago, this would be quite a frightening walk. Not so much for the Millwall fans, but if some of the away fans had got lost en route, because they'd arrive at Surrey Dock Station and they'd try and find their way to the Den, and then they were really running the gauntlet, because people would come out of all these, tower blocks and just start chucking abuse out, and word would spread. It was like a virus, and then they'd set little traps at the other end of the footbridge, so you'd never get beyond there.
What kind of traps?
Man traps. Come on, you! That kind of stuff. You've heard those noises before, haven't you? Yeah. So you got that Eden's boarding French lessons. Did some of these. These are from Newell and Lombrieve caves.
Still put on the screen.
Yeah, with me boots on, I'm fine. Yeah, time Time moves in a mysterious way. It moves in a very idiosyncratic and exhilarating way. You know, time passes very quickly. We cover a lot of ground. It's surprising for a man of his age at 72 that he still has this motor, this kind of physical motor that is trying to keep up with his his intellectual and psychological motor, because that you know, as we all know, is well oiled. But there's something about walking with him that that I find contagious and inspiring.
By this, that's the cityscape, you know, on the Isle of Dogs.
Yeah.
Those red brick buildings. That there, there's one with the funny roof. See the crane to the right come down the apex of the...
Yeah, I can see him.
Though that's Bent's house, that one.
Ah, brilliant.
So we were
you're bang
third
across
window.
from
Yeah,
Docklands.
we saw that, you just go...
Amazing.
Yeah, right
Amazing.
opposite. Yeah.
And it's so funny to be this side of the river, real low rent, and
Yeah.
that side of the river, all the big money, Citibank and stuff is going up.
But it also took ages for people really, I mean, there's not a lot of well, there weren't at the beginning apartments in the big city banks,
no.
But now that's all changed. And, you know, it's like being in downtown New York.
Andrew stalls for a moment, taking a surreptitious blow by looking back down the Old Kent Road. He's frozen rigid in contemplation of unravelling mystery, as if some earlier self, in the first days of his intoxicated courtship of Layla, the youthful freedoms of the city should be revealed. He jumped back from the curb, pushed by the slipstream of the ghost of his own motorbike.
So looking at London not just as an abstract, but actually as a place where people, you know, have to negotiate lives and living. And so therefore a lot of the encounters are with, you know, such experiences that are lived, and of course death, which I think Andrew's near-death experience caused something, you know, to resonate through this odyssey or epic journey that actually maybe is at the heart of all journeys.
Yeah, this is a significant crossing, isn't it?
We're coming down to the Old Kent Road now.
This is where we come, the Old Kent Road.
So I was coming, it was about 9 o'clock at night. It had been drizzling, it wasn't wet, but as you can see there's 3 lanes of traffic here. One of them you would normally filter, but this one you can also go straight on. So it was a bit, I eased off. I was on a very big motorbike, and I probably got to about here when this guy here came across without seeing me and wiped me out, up over the pavement here, careered across, and I think I eventually ended up upside down with the bike on top of me, somewhere like there in the middle of the road. And it was either the clutch lever or the pedal of the bike that had severed my main femoral artery. So I was bleeding out down here. And my memories from there are kind of about drift, in and out of consciousness. This arm had dislocated, so this arm was actually, he said, it was facing the wrong way. I think it took me about 3 weeks to surface. I'd fallen into a molasses. It's funny how for almost a year after the accident I would avoid the scene of the accident. It was a very powerful kind of resonator, and very ominous. And people always talk about this post-traumatic stress syndrome where you're avoiding. It's about avoidance. So being here today is very, very strange and quite powerful, quite pregnant, quite rich.
4 days of the mind map had vanished and there was no recovering them. He went somewhere else. The film of the ambulance ride, the surgery, the trauma ward, the muttering doctors, alarmed family was not of his making. The chosen location for the collision alarmed me, provoking memories of the morning of our Overground walk when we paused at the point where the railway crosses the M2 and looked down the Old Kent Road to the place where the accident would happen before moving on to Peckham Rye, Denmark Hill and King's College Hospital. And I couldn't help dredging beyond that fuzzy recollections of nights reeling home to Hackney after dining too well and drinking too much at the home of Brian Cathi, just on the other side of the road, a couple of 100 yards from the blood-soaked junction. There was a notebook poem from that time called A Handshake on the Telephone. It begins with a quote from Genesis P-Orridge about dreams being descriptions of how things really are. They're accurate, they're as real as a car smashing a cat in a road, he said. So I associated this Camberwell territory with shifting focus, inebriation, rucks and roadkill. Consciousness extinguished on a wheel, I wrote in 1975. You do not die of it or lose one single life, but where the beams cross, an accident awaits the supplicant. So, there we are.
An accident awaits the supplicant.
An accident awaits the supplicant. And the walk was a supplication.
Yeah, yeah.
And that was what was awaiting.
Do you know where the Old Kent Road is? Where's the Old Kent Road? How's your leg, Ian? Got any blood? Alright. Look, it's not worth getting a close-up.
When the animal migrates, John Berger wrote in Rail Tracks, his own railway meditation, the return is part of its journey. One could say an animal migrates for the sake of its return. The animal migrates for the sake of its return.